Hey guys, so set 6 is coming out today and I compiled a list of the strongest early game boards and augments you could play. I played a lot of PBE and watched a ton of streams to make this video so you guys didn't have to. I hope this video will help you guys learn the set way faster. So the first opener I'm going to be talking about is going to be the Enforcer opener. In the Enforcer opener, you're just going to be playing Vi and Caitlyn. And because you're playing Caitlyn, you need a second sniper, so Kog'Maw is a really good sniper. Now that you're playing Kog'Maw, you want 2 more units to round out the synergies. A good bruiser you could play is Alawi. And because you're playing Kog'Maw carry, you want a twin shot to round out the synergies, so a good twin shot would be Graves. And some good items for Kog'Maw could be something like Runans, Gwinsu's, maybe something like Giant Slayer. Generally, when you're playing Kog'Maw carry, with these items, you could transfer these items to someone like Urgot or Yone at level 8. If you have more AD heavy items like Last Whisper and IE, you're most likely going to be transitioning into Jhin instead. Another variation to this is instead of playing a second Bruiser, you could play a second Academy like Garen. But in my opinion, the 2 trait for Academy is kind of fake because it only benefits your Graves and your Garen. And the stats from Academy don't really benefit Graves and Garen that much, so a lot of the times this trait is pretty fake. Another variation you could play that isn't Kog'Maw is if you're playing Tristana instead as your second sniper. If you're playing Tristana, you want to round out your synergies with 2 other Yordles, so in this case you're just going to be playing Poppy and Lulu. And here you're just going to be stacking Tristana instead. The last variation is if you high roll a Misfortune early. If you get a Misfortune, this opens you up to Mercenary, which is sort of like the fortune of this set. I'll get more into how to play this later, but the board is mostly going to look like this. This board gives you 3 Mercenary, 2 Enforcer, 2 Bruisers, and 2 Snipers. So the next opener I'm going to be talking about is the Yordle opener. The Yordle opener happens when you either get 3 Yordles really early by stage 2-1, you get the Yordle dodge augment early, you get the calculated loss augment, or you get an early Vex. So there are 2 ways you could play Yordles. The first way you could play Yordles is to try and 3-star everything. And the game plan for that is to basically just lose streak all the way until the Krug round and not put any gold into leveling. By the Krug round, you're going to have maybe 50 gold to roll. And at that point, you want to hyper roll until 20 gold to try and 3-star all your 1-star Yordle units like Poppy, Ziggs. Make sure not to go below 20 gold, because if you go below 20 gold, you're going to have too much trouble restabilizing your econ later. Afterwards, you could re-econ up back until level 6, and then at level 6, you want to play 6 Yordles because you're most likely going to hit Heimer and Vex. And then your board is most likely going to look something like this. You basically want to stack all your tank items on your Poppy and your Vex, and you want to put all your AD items on your Tristana. Good items for Tristana is probably Deathblade, Gwinsu's, Runans. And then for Poppy, Gargoyle Stoneplate's really good. Warmog's also really good on Poppy and Vex. And then your 7th slot will just be Vhagar, and you want some AP and mana items on him. So there is a second way to play Yordles. The second way of playing Yordles takes advantage of the fact that Yordles generate a Yordle for you every turn. Basically, one really important fact to note is that if you already have a 3-star Ziggs, this Yordle trait is not going to ever give you another Ziggs because you already maxed out your Ziggs. So what this means is that if you already have a 3-star Ziggs, a 3-star Tristana, Lulu, and Poppy, this means that the Yordle trait can only give you Heimers or Vexes, which is basically 3 gold every turn. The alternate way you could play this is instead of going for Vhagar by 3-starring your Heimer and Vex, you can just use this Yordle trait as a secondary source of income to generate 3 extra gold every turn and play a tempo board to fast 8. So generally, when you play this variation, because Ziggs is such a weak unit, he doesn't go into your board, but you still want to 3-star your Ziggs and keep him on your bench to ensure that the Yordle doesn't generate you any Ziggs, because you want to guarantee that you get 3 gold every turn. So your level 7 board, when you're playing the tempo variation of Yordles, might look something like this. If you want more information on this variation, you could check out Mismatch Sock's guide on Reddit. I linked it in the description. He's the one that actually wrote the guide for this, so you could go check it out. So next is the Innovator opener. The Innovator opener just revolves around the 3 main early game Innovator units, which is just Singed, Ezreal, and Zilean. You're mostly going to be stacking Singed with all your tank items and Ezreal with all your AD items. There are 2 variations to this. The first variation is just going to be playing around Scrap and Clockwork. So for Scrap, you just want a second Scrap unit. So Trundle, Blitzcrank, Ziggs, they all work. I'm just going to put Blitzcrank. And for Clockwork, you just want to play a second Clockwork unit, so Camille. So for Ezreal, his items are pretty flexible. You could put Gwinsu's on him, Last Whisper, i.e. Runans, Bloodthirster, Deathblade, Hodge. You also want to take advantage of the scrap trait on Ezreal. What scrap does is when you put a component onto a scrap unit, it transforms it into a random full item that leverages that component to make it. So generally, like I mentioned before, if you have more attack speed heavy items, you're most likely going to be playing around Urgot or Yone. And if you have more AD items, you're probably playing around Jhin. If you have IE and Jewel Gauntlet, you're probably playing around Scion, Fiora, or Lux. The other variation to Innovators is instead of playing Clockwork and Scrap, you're just going to be playing around 3 CHEMTECH instead. So Camille and Blitzcrank go out. And you're just going to be playing Warwick and Twitch. If you're playing Warwick, you have the option to stack Warwick as well. Some really good items on Warwick are probably Winsu's and QSS. If you're stacking Warwick with these items, it opens you up to playing 5 CHEMTECH later with Urgot carry. Winsu's and QSS are pretty good items for Yone, so that's something you could consider as well. So let's talk about the CHEMTECH opener. So the CHEMTECH opener is just going to be 3 CHEMTECHs, and you're most likely going to be stacking your Warwick. Because you're playing Warwick, you want a second challenger, so Camille, and then Zillion. This is the same thing as I talked about before. The other variation to this is if you want to play 2 assassins instead. So a second assassin you could play is probably Talon. And in this case, you could just play a random second challenger, maybe someone like Quinn. Mid-game, you could consider playing 5 CHEMTECH. So you could take these out and play the remaining 2 CHEMTECHs like Lissandra and Zac. And then if you're playing Zac, you could play a second Bruiser later. So a good second Bruiser is probably someone like Trundle. If not Trundle, you could play around Lissandra instead. Since Lissandra is a Scholar, you could just play a second Scholar like Heimer. From this spot, depending on whether you stack Warwick with attack speed items or Lissandra with AP items, you're probably playing into some attack speed comp like Yone or Urgot, or you're probably playing around some AP comp because you stack your Lissandra, so probably Lux or Orianna. The other variation to this is to try and play Lissandra carry by 3-starring your Lissandra. You slow roll for Lissandra at level 8. One bigger incentive to play this 3-star Lissandra reroll is if you get the Trade Sector Augment. The Trade Sector Augment basically gives you a free reroll every turn, but you're only given that augment during the mid game. So if you get that augment, you can consider playing towards reroll Lissandra. So the Bruiser opener, this one's pretty simple. You get the Bruiser opener when you get 4 Bruisers early. This could happen when you're dealt a Cho'Gath early from your orbs or maybe a Zac. This enables you to play 4 Bruisers really quickly, and 4 Bruisers is literally like one of the most broken traits in the game early game. Game plan for this is if you get a Bruiser start, one very good item you can look towards building is Sunfire Cape. Because the fights last so long, Sunfire Cape is just going to wear your enemy board down and you're just going to win the fight from out-sustaining them. So at level 6, you have a choice. You could try and go for 3-star Trundle. So Trundle was really broken in the PBE server. People would just 3-star Trundle and stack him with items like Runans, Hodge, Winsu's, and he would literally just 1v9. I don't know if this is going to change in the live server, but this is one option you can consider, especially if you get the Trade Sector Augment. If you decide not to go this variation, you could just play a standard mid-game Bruiser board, maybe play 6 Bruisers mid-game, and then because you're playing 6 Bruisers, you already have 2 Mutant, you just play a 3rd Mutant, so Malzahar. Then you could stack like some AD items on Trundle, tank items on whoever you 2-star, and make sure to have Sunfire Cape, and then AP items on your Malzahar. So Malzahar, I think he's good with like Jewel Gauntlet, Jojen, and then eventually you want to play around Kai'Sa later. Kai'Sa's a really good endgame unit, and she's also a mutant, so you want to take out Malzahar for Kai'Sa, and then move all your AP items onto your Kai'Sa. So probably something like this. So late game, you want to drop out of your lower 1-star unit Bruisers like Alawi and Vi, and you just want to play legendary units. So the Mutant opener happens when you get dealt an early Cho'Gath. This enables you to play 3 Mutants really early into the game. And how Mutant works is that every game, Mutant is going to be a different trait that grants unique bonuses. And this is different every single game. Generally, this doesn't matter too much early game, and it matters more for late game. So if it's like a good trait, you want to consider sticking with Mutant until late game, but if it's a bad trait like Cybernetic, most of the time you want to pivot out of Mutant. So the game plan for this is because Cho'Gath is a Colossus, you need to be level 4 to play this board. So you're going to level to 4 on stage 2-1, stack all your tank items on your Cho'Gath, and all your attack speed and AD items on your Kog'Maw. So because you're playing Cho'Gath, you want a second Brawler, so Vi. And then because you're playing Vi and you have a Sniper, the perfect unit is going to be Caitlyn. This gives you Sniper and Enforcer, and this gives you an insane board at level 6. If you have a lot of attack speed items, you probably play into Yone, Urgot. If you have AD items, you play into Jhin. The other variation to Mutant opener is you get Malzahar later on. So if you get Malzahar, you don't want to play Caitlyn, you want to play a second Arcanist. So probably Ziggs. And then if you're playing Ziggs, probably you want another scrap. So instead of Vi, you just play Trundle. This gives you Bruiser and Scrap. And then here, you're just stacking Malzahar instead. So if you're stacking Malzahar with your AP items, generally, you're most likely going to be playing into Lux, Orianna, or Kai'Sa. So the next opener is going to be the Assassin opener. This opener happens when you get dealt 2 Assassins early. This could be Katarina, EKKO, or 2 of the lower cost units. One really strong board you can make if you get both Katarina and EKKO is if you play Blitzcrank and Garen. This gives you 4 perfect synergies. But most of the time, this is probably not realistic, so I'm just going to drop EKKO in this case and play Twitch. From this spot, because you have 1 scrap ready, you could just play a second one. So you could probably play someone like Trundle or something. And then because you have Trundle, you could just play a second Bruiser like Alawi. Alternatively, you just play a second Bodyguard like Darius. And in this spot, you just want to stack your Katarina. Good items for Katarina are Hodge, IE, and Deathcap. There are other variations to this. You could play around SHACO carry as well. So for SHACO carry, good items for him are probably Last Whisper, IE, Runans probably. If you have SHACO, you want to play around 3 Syndicate. So Darius is good, and then you want a 3rd Syndicate. So probably you could play someone like Zyra instead over Trundle. Mid-game, you also have the option of playing 4 Assassins. So you could just drop Blitzcrank, drop Garen. And then here, you could just play EKKO and maybe Talon instead. This gives you 4 Assassins and 3 Syndicate with SHACO carry. Pretty strong. And you just stack all your tank items on your Darius. So the game plan for Assassins is after you stabilize your mid game with 4 Assassins, you want to go level 8. You want to slow roll for SHACO 3. You want to roll at level 8 because you want to be able to hit Akali late game. So late game, your carries are going to be SHACO or Akali, and you're most likely going to be playing some variation of 4 Assassins and 5 Syndicate. Okay, so the next opener is going to be the Scrap opener, which just consists of you getting 2 Scrap units early game. How Scrap works is whenever you put a component on one of your Scrap units, at the start of every fight, it's going to transform that component into a random full item that requires that component to make it. So for example, if you put a glove on your Ezreal, that item is going to transform into an IE or Last Whisper or Thief's Gloves or Hodge or Jeweled Gauntlet. Generally, from my experience, for carry units like Ezreal and Ziggs, Glove is the best Scrap component to put on them because every single one of those items are really good. For tank units like Blitz, from my experience, Belt and Chain Vest are usually the go-to items because they build into really good tank items. So regarding the variations, if you're playing a 2 Scrap backline, you're just going to play any 2 frontline units. For example, you go with a Bodyguard frontline. You could also play 2 Bruisers with Alawi and maybe Vi. If you don't get Ziggs, you could play Trundle instead, who is also a Bruiser. And because you have Trundle, you could just play a second unit. Maybe you could play Caitlyn or something to get Enforcer with Vi, and you'll still get Scrap. If you don't get Trundle, you could also play around Blitzcrank. You have Blitzcrank. You could play around a second Bodyguard like Poppy. Sometimes you get 4 Scrap. If we take out these units, let's play all 4 Scrap units early. And with this board, what you want to do is to just put 1 component on each of your units. It only works for 3, so maybe 1 on Ezreal, 1 on Ziggs, and 1 on Trundle. And this way you could just sort of outvalue your opponents with better items. The other variation is to just play a 2 Scrap frontline. In this case, you could literally just play any backline you want, Katarina and Garen. This gives you Protector and Academy. And then because you're playing Katarina, you could just play a second assassin like Twitch. So next is going to be the Challenger opener. This opener happens when you get 2 challengers early or you get SAMIRA. So if you get SAMIRA early, she's the hard challenger to get. This gives you the option to play 4 challengers early game. So the 4 challengers you want early game are Camille, Quinn, and Warwick. Because you're playing Camille, a very good unit you can splash in is Zillion for 2 Clockwork. And from this spot, you usually want to stack your SAMIRA. So good items for SAMIRA could be IE, Runans, Bloodthirster, or Last Whisper, or Gwynsu's, or Hodge. Pretty flexible, just stack any attack speed or AD items on her. And depending on whether you go attack speed or AD, you could go into Yone, or Urgot, or Jhin. So if you don't get 4 challengers early, you could also play around 3 Imperial. So the other Imperial units are Swain and Talon. This gives you 3 Imperial and 2 Challenger. And here you can just stack all your tank items in your Swain. If you don't get SAMIRA, you could just play around 2 Challengers. So if you're playing around 2 Challengers, you just play the default 2 Challengers you get early game, which is Camille and Warwick. And then because you're playing Camille, the other unit you want to put in is Zillion. This is just the standard 3-unit Clockwork Challenger opener. And I said this before already, but from this spot, you just play 3 CHEMTECH. Or you could play 3 Innovators instead. If you're playing this variation, again, you usually stack Warwick or Camille, and then all your tank items on your Singed. Okay, so next is going to be the Mercenary opener. How Mercenary works this set is very, very similar to Fortune in set 4. If you're not familiar with it, basically what it does is every time you lose, you get better rewards added into your chest, and then you could cash out from your chest after one win. The trade-off for this is that the Mercenary units tend to be pretty weak, so when you're playing Mercenary, sometimes it's very hard to win, and if you're too greedy, you could just bleed out and die. But the Mercenary opener happens when you get a Gangplank, Misfortune, or the Mercenary Augment early. The reason why is because when you already have one of those units, you only need Alawi and Quinn to hit 3 Mercenary at 2-1. And if you get 3 Mercenary at 2-1, you're in a really, really good spot. So generally, if you get one of these units, you want to pre-level at stage 1-4, so you get higher chances of hitting your Quinn at stage 2-1. From that spot, you just want to develop your board in a way to max out your synergies. So let's say your board might look something like this early on. If you're playing Gangplank, you're going to want to play Graves for Twin Shot. And if you're playing Alawi, you probably want a second Bruiser like Vi. And then if you're playing Vi, a very good unit you can splash in is Caitlyn. This gives you 2 Enforcers. And then later on, if you get Misfortune, you can swap out Quinn for Misfortune. This gives you a really good set of synergies for your Mercenary board. And generally, when you're playing Mercenaries, you want to stack Gangplank. So good items for Gangplank could probably be Runans, IE, maybe RFC or Gwinsu's or Bloodthirster. So the game plan for a Mercenary is you generally want to lose streak until stage 3-2, and then depending on your HP and your board, you decide if you want to roll down a little on stage 3-2 to cash out or not. The cash out could happen on stage 3-2 or stage 4-1. You could use your judgment on when you want to cash out. One thing to note is that if you already win before stage 3-2 from fighting a really weak player, probably want to get out of Mercenary because you already got your reward. There's no need to keep playing your weak Mercenary units. Just take your cash out and then pivot into a stronger board. Otherwise, if you lose streak all the way to stage 4-1, from that spot, you could either play around 3-star Gangplank, or you could swap your whole board into a more standard fast 8 board because you're going to have so much money. You could probably just go 8 and roll down for something like Jhin or Fiora Yone with these items. So next is the Syndicate / Arcanist opener. I'm putting them both in the same section because these two traits usually go hand in hand, and the core unit of this early game board is TF because he's both a Syndicate and an Arcanist, and he's a really good carry unit early game. So if you start your game with an early TF2, you usually want to play 3 Syndicate and 2 Arcanists. So a board you might end up with might be something like this. This gives you 3 Syndicate and 2 Arcanists. And because you're playing Darius, you want a second Bodyguard, so probably Poppy. And then because you're missing 1 Yordle, maybe you'll get a Vex later. This gives you 3 Yordle. And then because you're playing Vex, you only need 1 more Arcanist for 4 Arcanists, so you could just play Swain at level 7. This gives you 4 Arcanists, 3 Syndicate, 3 Yordles, and 2 Bodyguards. Generally, you want to put all your tank items on either Darius or Poppy, depending on who you 2-star. Later on, if you get Vex, you can put your items on your Vex instead. And for your carry, it's most likely going to be TF. Good items on TF is probably Jewel Gauntlet, i.e. Blue Buff or Shojin or Death Cap. Any AP item is really good on TF. If you have Jewel Gauntlet IE, you could play into Fiora or Scion. If you have pure AP items and no IE, you could play into probably Lux or Orianna. If you get SHACO, you generally want to play around your SHACO instead because SHACO is a really good carry. In this case, you probably drop Zara for EKKO. This gives you 2 Scrap and 2 Assassin as well. And in this case, you could probably just stack your SHACO instead with AD items. So AD items on SHACO, probably IE, Last Whisper, Runans. It could be Bloodthirster, it could be Hodge, it could be Gwinsu's. Pretty much any attack speed or AD items are pretty good on SHACO. So depending on who you stack, either TF or SHACO, you could play into both an AP or AD heavy comp at level 8. So next up is going to be Academy. In my opinion, 2 Academy early is not that good because the 2 main Academy units are going to be Graves and Garen. And these 2 units don't really benefit that much from the AD and AP. So in my opinion, 2 Academy is kind of a fake trait early, unless you get Katarina. So if you get Katarina, you could probably consider playing 2 Academy, because this would actually benefit Katarina a lot. So if you get Katarina, you're playing around 2 Academy and 2 Assassins. So a second Assassin you could play is probably Twitch, and then a second Protector is just going to be Poppy. Later on, you could play your mid-game around 4 Academy. So your 4 Academy board might look something like this, and then later on, you probably drop Twitch for EKKO. And then because you're playing EKKO, you want a scrap unit, so just drop your Poppy for Blitz. And this is a very, very strong level 6 board if you start off with your Katarina. And again, general items for Katarina are AP or crit items, so probably IE, Hodge, Deathcap. Jeweled Gauntlet also works on her. Blue Buff also works on her. John Slayer. And again, i.e. Jewel Gauntlet usually plays into Fiora or Scion, and then full AP items plays into Lux or Orianna. Okay, so now I pretty much went over all the strongest early game boards you can make already. I'm going to talk about the strongest early game augments you could take. So there are 5 main early game augments that are really strong that you should be looking out for. And these are Built Different, Calculated Loss, Phony Frontline, Mercenary Heart, and So Small. So for Built Different, this requires a completely different playstyle. So I'll just refer to my TFT team builder again. How it works is if your unit doesn't have any traits active, it's going to gain a stupid amount of HP and attack speed early game. So generally, the units with the most synergies tend to be the most broken, like Blitzcrank, because he's a scrap, protector, and bodyguard. But if you take Built Different, these units automatically become bad because it limits any other units you could play. So units you want to look out for are going to be units with 2 traits instead. So for example, Illaoi is probably pretty good because it's a mercenary and a bruiser only. Probably Poppy. And then for your carries, you could play Ezreal or something. And then let's think about another unit you could play that doesn't have any synergies. So probably Caitlyn. And maybe Camille. So this is a very, very strong board for your Built Different opener because you have no traits and every single one of your units gains a stupid amount of HP and attack speed. The game plan for Built Different is you just want to play your strongest board with no traits and then you go fast 8. And then once you're level 8, because you have so much HP and econ, you could just pivot your board into a standard level 8 board with normal synergies and just play with its dead augments. Because from that spot, you have so much HP and econ that it's very, very hard to bot for from that spot. So in that case, you just play for top 4. In a situation where your third augment is Built Different as well, you could actually consider sticking with this board and going fast 9. And then at level 9, you pivot your board into a legendary board and play around no traits. So finally, I'm going to go through the rest of these augments. So Calculated Loss. This is really good for Yordles because you're most likely going to lose streak all the way until the Krug round and you're going to hyper roll down. This is also really good for Mercenaries because you're going to be lose streaking early as well. And the free shot refreshes might save you a lot of HP. Phony Frontline is really good. If you get this, it's basically a free win streak onto stage 3, 2, or 4, 1 because you're essentially getting 2 free units. Mercenary Heart is really OP because it's basically the Mercenary opener at stage 1, 2, and you're just going to be playing around 3 Mercenary and trying to cash out. So Small, this is basically the Yordle augment. If you get this augment, you generally want to try and play around Yordles early and then play towards one of the Yordle variations I talked about earlier in the video. So that's basically the end of the video. I know the beginning of every set could be pretty confusing. Next week, I'm planning to release a very detailed, in-depth augment guide on what augments you should take early, mid, and late game. So if you're interested in that video, I recommend you subscribe to my channel and get updated. If you enjoyed this guide, please leave a like and comment down below, and I'll see you guys next time.